it's becoming a much more elevated executive role. If you look at the things that CHROs do now versus what they did even a few years ago, 10 years ago when I was a CHRO at Motorola, it's just night and day. And I think looking at healthcare has to be looked at in that context.
Welcome to Broken Benefits. I'm your host, Lee Lewis, and this is a podcast where we learn from top employer experts on how to fix our broken benefits to save lives, save dollars, and save your talent. All right, welcome everyone back to Broken Benefits. So excited about today's guest, Shelly Carlin. Shelly was the former HR leader at Motorola. That's the SVP of HR and Communications, as well as leading VP of Global Compensation Benefits at Campbell's. She is the CEO of the American Health Policy Institute, or API, and also the EVP, or the Executive Vice President over at the HRPA, or the HR Policy Association. So excited to have her here to kick off a series of conversations we're having with leading CHROs and how it intersects with healthcare. Shelly, welcome so much to the show, and we're glad to have you.
Great, Lee. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Oh, I totally agree. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what it's like for most CHROs as it relates to managing in an enormous organization and the interactions that you have with healthcare, because most healthcare does report into you.
You know, as a CHRO, it's funny because the job of the CHRO has changed so much over the past 5, certainly the past 10 years. It's becoming a much more elevated executive role. If you look at the things that CHROs do now versus what they did even a few years ago, 10 years ago when I was a CHRO at Motorola, it's just night and day. And I think looking at healthcare has to be looked at in that context. So healthcare is just one of a million things coming at the CHRO, and they have so many competing priorities. The number one job of the CHRO is really to use talent to drive the business results of the organization. And talent meaning getting the right people in the right place at the right time, but also talent in terms of how do you help shepherd the culture of the organization to make that talent the best it can be. Absolutely, healthcare is part of that equation, but it's one of very, very, very many other factors. And so I think, the overwhelming nature of everything that's coming at CHROs and the way the job has changed. But secondly, and I think we'll talk about this, it's the feeling from a CHRO's perspective that, I'm a small part of this massive system that is broken in society generally in the United States. There's nothing I can do really to impact it. So I'm just going to be content with managing it, keeping it in its little box, basically.
Everyone, now just a quick word from today's sponsor.
Hello.
Hi, I'm here to pick up a prescription.
Okay. Okay, your total is $80.
But I have insurance.
We ran your insurance, that's just your copay.
Can you hold on to that for me? I'll be back later.
58 million American adults can't afford their prescriptions. Many of these people work for companies just like yours. Start giving your employees 100% medical coverage with Catalyze Health.
Now, just to get a sense about what percentage of a CHRO's time might be able to be focused on healthcare?
I think that varies all over the place. And I think if you talk to some CHROs, it will be, less than 10%. Others, it may be a quarter. Again, depends on the environment, depends on the business model. So if you're in an organization that has thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, that, labor is a core element of your value proposition and how you deliver to your customers, you're clearly going to be much more focused on it than if you're, I come from a technology organization whose, value proposition is embedded in patents that had been developed, years and years and years prior. And so it's not that people were not important, but from a financial perspective, people were a very much smaller portion of the total kind of structure of how we created value as an organization. So I think it's all over the map. And then it also has to do with the particular CHRO's leanings. Most of us who come to the role don't have a background in benefits. And so it's really hard to want to spend a lot of time in something that you're not competent in, right? CHOs are human. Who likes to spend time on things you're not good at?
Yeah. And so most CHROs, coming from this perspective, you're you're working with so many different priorities. Healthcare is one of those, but it's not an area where you have a lot of expertise. How do most CHROs view healthcare and the way that it should be managed? You mentioned managing it. What are the objectives? What makes a win each year for a CHRO as it relates to the healthcare budget?
I think unfortunately most CHROs view healthcare as something
Mhm.
that they can't really impact in any transformational way. That your job on a good day is to keep it within kind of a predictable range. We all assume it's going to go up every year. Let's just keep that within a corridor that the CFO can plan against, right? So I
Right?
think that's kind of what most people look at, and that actually is kind of a interesting link to my journey. So I got into healthcare not really when I was a CHRO. I mean, I was one of those let's keep it in the
Mm.
ballpark kind of thing. But
Right.
after I left being the CHRO role and came to work at the HR Policy Association, um, back in 2018, the founding CEO of the American Health Policy Institute, Tevi Troy, left the role, and the association asked if I would move over and take over that role. I did that, and it was a very different time. It was a time where we felt like we were going to, as a society, have a honest conversation about, public options, single payer, even. People forget how we felt like there might be transformational change coming in the latter half of that decade. So my job was to really basically get CHROs ready. So why aren't CHROs
Mm.
more engaged in this? So I've since retired from the CEO role, and that's been taken over by somebody else. But my role now has been transitioning into uh, how do we get CHROs in a position where they do spend more time on healthcare? And I think to answer your question, they don't spend as much time on healthcare because they don't feel like they can impact it because they're cog in a very broken system. And
Right?
secondly, they don't know enough about it, right? So nobody wants to spend time on something you're not good at. And so my mission
Yeah.
now in the association has really been how do we prepare the next generation of HR leaders to really feel like they can make an impact.
Okay. I want to unpack this because I think part of the root of what keeps our system in stasis at that 6-7% trend every year, and so many intermediaries that work against the employer's interests, is because a lot of these decisions are rolling up to individuals who have so much else going on and who don't have a lot of expertise in this area. What are some of the steps that you're thinking about of how we can help CHROs to catch that healthcare bug and to start making that change?
Yeah, for the first one is obviously education. That's kind of what I've been spending a lot of time on. But and education not around the details of how to design a plan. That's not what a CHRO needs to know. That's not our job, right? The
Right?
education needs to be about the context and the ecosystem in which the employer plan operates. So when I came into the role, and I had been a total rewards leader, I had theoretically been somebody who managed benefits, but even I didn't understand the large context of all the stakeholders and all of the players and how interrelated they are. So I think kind of what we need to be doing is first kind of educating, and then secondly, the power of acting collectively. So no employer, absent maybe a very few very large employers, can really make a dent in this as much as employers acting together. So I know, Lee with the Health Transformation Alliance, that's a key example of how when employers come together, they can affect change in the system. So I think the ways that we need to be talking more about is how do we act collectively? How do we as CHROs look for look for the obvious? So the healthcare system operates in a way that no business we would ever in any of our other parts of the supply chain put up with, right?
Right.
We would never allow this. So I think it's really just getting people to realize, hey, there's some things here that just need to change, and B, we can do this if we act together.
Oh, this is really good. What is the hook for a CHRO that could help compel them to have a desire to do this? for some teams, it's, I'll speak sometimes with municipalities and they say, look, we have to change it or we're dead, right? Like we have a fixed amount of tax revenue and there's no more money. So we have to find ways to change. And that might be a motivation. For some employers, the motivation could lie elsewhere. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's trying to do a better job or to be more competitive in winning talent. For most CHROs, what do you think is the piece of information that is most likely to give them an aha moment of, oh, really, like I didn't know that, and I need to maybe start taking a closer look here?
Yeah, I think that it varies. So there'd be a couple of different levers that is going to get a CHRO's attention. One is just cost. I mean, let's face it, depending on where you sit, what organization you sit in, this expense could be significant. So anytime you're managing an expense item of that size, you better pay attention to it. So the first layer and the most obvious is cost. And it's not just the absolute cost, because, I think it's yes, it's a big cost, but it's the unpredictability of the changes in that cost, and particularly changes that go up. CFOs never come beating down your door when costs are dropping, right? You look like a hero. But it's the size of the cost and the fact that, the volatile, unpredictable changes. So first thing is obviously understand what percentage of your total spend that you're required to manage it, and how big that is and how that impacts the profitability of your business. But more what I'm seeing, particularly post the pandemic, is a real fundamental shift in what employees in the workplace are expecting from their employers. I think there's a shift going on in terms of what people expect from the employment relationship, not just with the new entrants into the workplace. We hear about that all the time. Younger people coming in the workplace have different expectations, and they do. But it's also people of my generation who are basically saying, look, I want to still work, but I want to do it in a different way. I want different things out of it. I have higher expectations. I want to, they use the phrase, bring your whole self to work. I want to be able to be in an environment where I feel like I can be myself and feel like the people that are running that environment care about me. I think that's far more likely to get a CHRO's attention, to say, hey, if you think more expansively about healthcare and well-being, that is going to help you win with the workforce generally, not just the new entrants, but everybody. I mean, nobody wants to lose the expertise of the people that are going to be retiring, sooner than they need to. So how do you create a strategy that's going to leverage this desire to be yourself, to feel cared for in the workplace? And I think that's a far more palatable and interesting, if you will, lever for a CHRO to pull, because it touches all different kinds of strategies that they could employ.
I want to unpack the cost concept a little bit. So CHRO is saying, hey, keep us in the lane, right? Keep us with average costs that I can just give to the CFO. And I don't want to have complaints or other disruption. I don't want this to distract me from all the work I'm doing over here. We want actually to convince that CHRO that no, you absolutely should be looking over here and spending some time. And it's extremely valuable for you to spend time looking at and working with healthcare. And you mentioned that cost is something that we could anchor in to bring them into it. I would assume if the costs balloon, then that forces them to pay attention to it. But if the costs are kind of still staying in that lane, they're still really high, but 5% is what everybody else is experiencing. What can we teach CHROs so that they say, oh, wait, no, I need to go over here because there's opportunity, sort of greed over fear, or, seeking opportunity or strategic reasons rather than a reactionary response?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I mean, costs are like, you can stay in the lane, if you will.
Right.
But there's a lot of different ways to stay in the lane. One, you can do it, kind of the right way, meaning you're attacking core issues, you're driving waste and inefficiencies out of the system. You're doing it in one way, versus I can stay in that lane by just shifting costs to my employees, which is a short-term strategy that's going to come back and get you. So
that's right. And you can't do it forever.
The first thing to know on cost is, okay, how are you keeping it in the lane? So the first kind of question to kind of put to CHROs is, yeah, you're doing great. You're within trend. How did you do that? What are other elements in your system, in your HR systems, that are indicating that maybe that's creating a problem for you? One of the other areas I work in the association is the whole area of employee and labor relations. And again, post pandemic, it
Mm.
was happening before the pandemic, but post pandemic, we're seeing a lot more interest in employee voice, interest in employees having a say in the workplace, which is leading to, increased higher levels of union campaigns. So, you can't, if you pull a lever on cost in one way, that may show up later down the road in a way that you don't want, in terms of employees not being happy, and seeking others to kind of represent them. So that's the first equation: is be careful how you stay in that lane. Okay, so once you've and nobody wants to get there, right? And particularly now, nobody wants to get there. The second then is, okay, well, if I stay in the lane, yeah, I can't just shift costs, and I think people have kind of realized that. How do I do it? To me, it's the most so much obvious low hanging fruit, just in the waste and the inefficiencies. So nobody would design a system the way that we have, right? I mean,
Right.
and when you have a system as complex as what the US healthcare system is, the more complex something is, the harder it is to manage, the more complex it is. And I mean, one of the signs of complexity is you see whole industries pop up just to help you navigate this larger industry. So all the
Mm.
consulting firms, all of the people that are coming up to let me help your employees navigate this broken system. That's a clear red flag that something's broken. So going after waste, fraud, inefficiencies, I mean, I don't think any of us really do a great job in that. The challenge is, how do you do that? If you're a big employer, you have staff, the potential return is great. You can get the investment, say, let me go after this. Because if you're a mid-size or a smaller employer, may not have the staff, that's where collective action and partnerships come into play. So I think it's twofold. It is, be careful how you get to the cost, and then there's just so much opportunity, which I think people don't realize how much opportunity there is to drive costs out.
Got it. How do we help CHROs to know how much opportunity there is here and help them to feel comfortable stepping a little bit into the unknown, where it's not an area where they have a lot of expertise?
Yeah, so this is really where your job as a leader of the function comes into play. So as a leader of the function, your job is to get the right people in the seats under you, who have the right balance, the right expertise to run the area. This is one huge opportunity area for CHROs. The benefits function is populated with a tremendous amount of very talented, highly skilled professionals with a lot of expertise in benefits. But what we don't see a lot of is people who have skill in transformational change, because these people have been doing this for a long time. They know, they've been very skilled and very efficient in helping their businesses navigate this broken system. In my opinion, what we need is to bring people who have training in other, perhaps systems engineering or data and analytics. People can come in on its face, look at this system and say, oh my goodness, here's 6 or 7 ways, failure points of the system or the process or whatever, that we can attack right off the top. Because again, there's an objective set of eyes. They don't have the history. They don't have any vested interest in the way the systems are. So I think, as a leader, a CHRO, thinking about the talent you have, staffing your benefits function, getting that right balance between detailed benefits expertise and transformational change agents, I think is key.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the concept of bringing in new and different talents to help in this category. And we've seen that everywhere within the HTA, that there are that teams that have a lot of different talents in quant, in HR, in legal, et cetera, in accounting and engineering, those teams with a diverse group of experiences perform exceptionally well. What is it that what are other ways that CHROs help to fix healthcare? You mentioned the importance of getting the right talent in place. And as the leader in this area, without them personally having to have experience, what are other things that leaders in CHROs can do to help fix healthcare from that high level?
Yeah, the other thing that you have at your disposal as a CHRO is you have the ear of the CEO. You have the ear of the
Okay.
CFO.
Okay.
CHROs are a powerful group collectively, and I've talked about collective action already. But nothing can replace when you get a CEO or other senior members of your team, your colleagues in the C-suite, energized behind transformational change. So think about it this way: if I, as a CHRO, are trying to trying to negotiate with one of my providers in my vendor space on healthcare, and I'm really trying to drive a change, and that vendor's resisting for whatever reason, if they know that my CEO is also on board and my CEO knows their CEO, and just bringing the power of the C-suite to the table in those negotiations, basically saying this is a critical business issue for us. We really want to partner with you. We really want a relationship with you going forward, but we need to find some common ground to help get at a better outcome for both of us on this side. So this is it's a hard thing to do, but again, getting your peers in the C-suite and your boss engaged in transformational change requires you to get them to see kind of what's on the other side of it. So I think that's not used enough, because as a CHRO, your temptation is just let me manage this and keep it under control, because I don't want my CEO to see it, because that maybe look like I'm not managing it.
Right.
You have to be confident enough in your job as a CHRO to say, hey, this is a really big problem. I need to enlist your guys' help in driving this. It's not an admission of failure. It's admission that we are up against a broken system.
Yeah. And I think the major vendors thrive in that. They know that the benefits team doesn't necessarily have visibility into the C-suite. They know that the benefits team probably doesn't have authority to engage in a lawsuit against them, regardless of the behavior that occurs. And that even if they did, it might be seen as a failure on their part, on the staff's part, not on the vendor. So if you have a vendor run amok, the staff gets in trouble, not the vendor. And it really perpetuates a very bad system. And I think you're exactly right. It's like the CHRO is the bridge into the entire C-suite and can help to bring some adult supervision back to the major vendors. Not to say that the benefits team isn't that kind of supervision, but they simply aren't authorized to be heavy-handed or to bring the leverage that is necessary. And without that leverage, bad behavior is everywhere in this.
Yeah, and think about it also. I mean, so how does the CHRO do that? It's easy. Yeah, Shelly, it's easy for you to say that. But how do I first get over I'm going to look like I'm incompetent, I can't manage my own business?
That's right.
Okay, that's the first step. So that's where my particular passion of driving educational programs for CHROs comes into play. If you understand just how the entirety of the ecosystem operates, then you're going to be in a lot better position to say to explain to your CEO or to your C-suite colleagues, hey, it's not my benefits team's fault. Did you know this is how PBMs get paid? Did you know this is how, while it's our data, we still cannot, kind of get access to it.
Access to it.
But you can't, if you're a CHO that comes in without that understanding of the entirety of the system, there's no way you're going to persuade somebody of something that you don't even understand yourself. So it all goes back to getting CHROs prepared with the foundational knowledge of the entirety of the system. And again, this is really interesting because we operate in, and we're constrained by a system that almost half of which are people that aren't our employees. So you've got people covered under Medicare, Medicaid, other things. They may or may not be your employees, but what happens in those things external to the employer-based system impacts the employer-based system. That's what makes it even more complicated. So helping CEOs and C-suite colleagues understand the environment in which employer-sponsored care works is super important, and that's the starting point, because you're not going to be able to get them on board until they have that understanding.
I want to dive deeper into this concept of education, because there is a balance. Right now, we have leaders who just don't want to touch healthcare because it seems like a bag of cats and rattlesnakes. And so we push it to the side. On the other hand, there's so much that you could learn. We don't want to over-educate. Walk me through a little bit around, you've been developing these courses. What are the key points that we need to educate that don't intimidate the audience, but get them what they need to know to start making a difference?
Yeah, we've taken an approach to CHRO education that really starts with the notion that you, let me back up. It starts with the kind of the realization several years ago that there was an increase in number of people coming to the CHRO role who either didn't have HR experience at all or didn't have HR experience in any of the kind of traditional executive comp or benefits or labor. So they were coming, and so they were coming without that foundational knowledge that you get having come up through one of the disciplines of HR. So, kind of our approach has been, all right, they don't need to know how to design a healthcare plan. They don't need to know the ins and outs of all of the legislation that you have to deal with. They don't know how to manage. They don't need to know, the specifics of how you run an annual enrollment process. What they do need to know is the strategic level of how the marketplace works, who the key players are, the role of government, the role of the media. So we take that whole approach of starting in these areas with an assessment of the environment in which you operate. So for healthcare, we go through all the stakeholders, the patients and providers and insurers and what role they play in PBMs. And for many of the people in our courses some are CHROs already, some are HR business partners who aspire to be CHROs.
Yeah.
First time they're hearing about some of these players. And I'll admit, like when I got into the CHRO role, there were some people I had no idea. I'm like, who is that? And what do they do?
Wow.
So we start that with every discipline. So not just healthcare. So when we do executive comp, we talk about investors and proxy advisors but what's common across all of our educational offerings is we talk about the role of government. We talk about the role of media, talk about the role of employees, right? So, and then the other stakeholders. So the starting point really is understanding the context and the ecosystem in which you are trying to manage this function. And that's pretty much the entire first day of our sessions is talking about that. And then we do a very kind of a high level basic grounding in, the design of how to design a program. The challenge obviously is, particularly with benefits, is it is really easy to go down deep into the weeds if you're not careful. So our approach has been to stay high level. So we do that context stakeholdering on the first day. We then talk about public policy at a high level because the understanding of the legislation and the laws and the potential on the horizon of what is going to impact you is critically important, particularly in healthcare, because as I said, legislation that affects something like Medicare or Medicaid may not seem like it's going to affect you, but it is. So for example, the government being able to negotiate drug prices directly with Medicare. You might think, well, what does that have to do with employer-sponsored care? But unless you understand the ecosystem and how things work, you don't understand that, oh my gosh, that could end up, who knows, that could end up in raising my drug prices because of, artificially low negotiations on the Medicare side. So long answer to your question, but it is context, government, public policy, and then what's kind of currently happening. So on the healthcare side, we do a lot of bringing in innovators, bringing in people that are, because what we want to do for the participants is give them hope, right? Here's some people that are really doing stuff, right? Here's some people that are doing stuff. And I think when people come out of our courses the first couple of days are a little depressing, to be honest.
Yes.
Because let's go through the public policy kind of thing and what's the craziness that is Washington. But by the third day, they have a foundation, and then we show them people that are really making a difference, and they actually leave, I think, more hopeful than when they came in. A, they're armed with some knowledge and understanding, and B, they see evidence of people that are making a difference.
Oh, I love this. I love this so much. What do you think are the two or three most surprising things that your students take away after they begin learning about healthcare?
Yeah. I think that the first thing is what I just said. I think they are surprised that there's hope. Wow. A lot of times people are taking this course
because they believe there isn't any. And
Yeah, because they believe there isn't any, and yeah, and it's a black box, and I'm doing this because either, yeah, you know what, I think I need to take this course because I know in my back of my mind, I don't really know enough about benefits, and maybe this is a good way to get my toe in the water.
Yeah.
But I'm really just trying to understand it, and I think they come around like surprised that there is hope, that there are people that are doing things. I also think they come away with a larger appreciation for what benefits professionals go through. So here's another of
Yeah.
my soapboxes. How to bridge the gap between, and I'm not just benefit professionals in any of the deep disciplines of HR, whether it's executive comp, benefits, labor relations. If you're not careful, there can grow a big gap between those deep blue experts in those professions
Right.
and the organization, the business strategy as a whole, because they're in a job that's so difficult, so complex. Um, as a CHRO, I always viewed my job as continuing to build that connection so that the benefits team never lost sight of what we were doing as a business. They never lost sight of the overall talent and labor strategy. Same with the exec comp team and so forth. So I think people who go through our courses get a greater appreciation for the life of the benefits professional, which will help them make those benefits folks feel valued, because it's a lonely job sometimes.
Super lonely. Yeah. Nobody
And
understands the problems that you're dealing with. Your
exactly.
leaders don't understand how challenging it is for you. And then you're grappling with like the Fortune 5 all day as this person a little bit out on an island. Wow, that feels, just framing it like that. These are my people, but it feels
Yeah.
lonely just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a lonely job, and they get benefits, and I'll say again, say the same thing about our exec comp professionals or labor folks. They can get isolated within the HR organization because, let's be frank, the pecking order in HR is business HR business partners. That's the glamorous, sexy job. They're the ones that kind of hang out with the business all the time.
Yeah,
So I always
right.
view these courses as an opportunity for, if you're a business partner or taking this course, to really get in the shoes and walk in the shoes of these experts that are keeping the engine running, developing a greater appreciation, which again hopefully will lead to stronger relationships, which are essential if you're going to bring the benefits folks along with you when you want to drive transformational change. We haven't talked about transformational change and what it takes, but to me, in my experience, most transformational change efforts fail because people do not because you don't have a great idea and you're not right. It's because you don't bring the people along with you.
Everyone, now just a quick word from today's sponsor.
Hey, Dad, have you seen my PlayStation?
People who work for companies just like yours are desperate for any way to pay their medical debt. Support your employees by giving them 100% medical coverage with Catalyze Health.
One way to bring people along with you is through incentives and vision. How can CHROs change the vision of what they want out of healthcare? And is it realistic for them to change the way these teams are bonused and incentivized to get better results?
Yeah, I think it starts with a bigger conversation about what do you define as the role of healthcare in your organization, in your talent strategy. So, when assessing whether or not your healthcare plans are performing the way you want them to, begs the question of, well, what do you want out of them? So before you can decide about incentives for the people that are running the program, you need to back up and be very sure that you have agreement on the role of healthcare in your value proposition. So I've talked earlier about how employee expectations of the employment relationship are changing. Employees are expecting the employer to care a lot more about their overall well-being than ever before. There's a shift in the workplace of people wanting to feel comfortable about sharing more of themselves, right? Newer generations, you clearly see that with newer employees coming into the workplace. They want to share things that, I'll be frank, people in my generation, when we came in the workforce, like there was a clear, kind of wall between your work persona and your home persona. That's kind of gone, right? That's kind of gone. So, there's you have to be clear in understanding that we have to pick a lane where we want healthcare to play in our talent strategy. Is it core and critical to the culture we're trying to create? If so, then, are we investing the amount that we need to invest to do that? Right. So that's kind of important. If you take that position, and I was talking to an employer the other day who, at the center of what they do is the employee experience, right? That's at the center. Okay. So that gives a very clear sign to the benefits team that not only do they have to have high quality plans in terms of design, how employees interact with those plans is super important. So right there, you get a good sense for, okay, all right, this is, I'm going to invest in that. Now, once you decide you're going to invest in that, then setting up incentives, and maybe those incentives are, satisfaction related. Do employees feel like they can access the plans properly? Do they have a good experience? On the other hand, if you work for an employer the way I did, where our approach was, median, no better, no worse, because we didn't view benefits as important as other things in our talent value proposition. Maybe your incentives are okay, cost related, efficiency related. So long answer to your question, but in order to figure out how you set up incentives for your team, you have to first be clear about what role healthcare plays. And this is hard because, again, if you're a healthcare professional, it's your life's work. You want to believe that it is front and center and core to the value proposition of where you work. It's a hard message to say, we're not going to be best in class. And your job is to manage it within this range because we are investing in other things. That's a tough job for a CHRO to deliver. But unfortunately, a lot of CHROs don't deliver that job, and they're misleading their benefits team into thinking that the organization is going to support benefits at a higher level than what they really are prepared to do. And that breeds disappointment, right? So if you're not clear with your benefits team about how benefits is in the entire value proposition, and then they continue to get rejected about more investment and new things, you're not doing them any favors. I don't know if any of that made any sense, but it's about being honest about where healthcare plays in your value proposition.
I love the idea of setting a vision where it's, how do we want to be on cost? What do we want that to look like in 1 year, 3 years? What are we doing? What kind of an experience do we want to deliver? Are we delivering it today? Do people like what we have today? Because if people don't like what we have, we're spending $1 billion a year on this. We probably should change it. I mean, it's our money. Let's get something good out of it, right? So that people like it. Do they brag about it at a barbecue? These kinds of thoughts. And then looking at, how is it inclusive? How efficient are we? I like that a lot in terms of setting a vision.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things to think about as a leader of the function, you should always go back and every so often ask, okay, like we did in the 2015 timeframe, a lot of us were asking, if these exchanges work out, these Obamacare exchanges work out, would I offer healthcare if I didn't have to? Or would I just be comfortable subsidizing my employees to go get it somewhere else? That seems like so far away. Like nobody's asking that question now. But
right.
With every program you kind of do, you need to always step back and say, would I offer it if I didn't have to? And if the answer is absolutely yes, it means it's driving, it's differentiator for you in talent. So continuing to challenge yourself on would I do it, and would I do it the way I do it today is super important. And asking your teams to continue to ask those questions is very important as well.
Pushing a little further on that, something that I do hear a lot that is concerning to me, would love your thought on this, is people say to me, Lee, I wish we could just all get to where we do a defined contribution. I'm going to give every employee 10,000 and just, you go buy what you want to buy. How great is that? Now I can budget for it and I can just say how much that I'm going to contribute. My immediate reaction on that is, okay, so now today you're offering them a nonprofit health plan. You don't want to earn any profit on your health plan. It breaks even to zero every time, or a little over under, but you're not trying to earn anything. And then if you take the same amount you're spending in the nonprofit plan and give it to your people, and now they go out on the open market to buy a plan in a pool of worse risk, so the same risk they would have just went up, and now it's a for-profit pool, So now there's a profit margin added. And also that pool has the same 5 or 6% trend. What do you think is going to happen? I almost feel like it's saying, oh my gosh, I can give this to you for $10,000, but I don't like that cost. I'd rather send you to go buy it for 20 and I'm going to just give you 9. That's what it feels like to me. But a lot of employers have brought this up. Am I missing something, or
no, there's lessons to be learned from, let's dial it back to when employers got out of the defined benefit pension business.
Okay.
What is at the core of this decision? It's risk shifting. Employers are doing this because they want to shift. It's a way to shift the risk of future, as I talked about before, unknown and unknowable kind of cost increases on an increasingly large component of your cost. So I think it's nothing more than the employer saying, I need to get more certainty. And you talked about it. Like, yeah, I'm going to give you, 10,000 this year, and I get control how much that 10,000 grows, if it grows at all, versus what I have today, which is, the healthcare market, which I have no control over, is going to control that. So it's the same calculus that employers made when they got out of the DB business. I don't want this anymore. It's a shifting to, there's a lot of talk about the ownership society back then. That's shifting ownership and the onus of this onto employees, who, again, I would argue, some employees may be totally okay with that. Some employees may be sophisticated consumers, able to go out in the marketplace, find a good deal or a better deal, and be completely fine with that. The question I have when you look at your talent strategy is, A, what is the message is the message that you're sending with that action, what consistent with how you want your employees to feel, and B, are all your employees going to be able to thrive in that kind of a world?
I appreciate that perspective so much. I haven't heard it phrased like that before, and it's right on.
But I also think, the other thing about this is, and I think you're starting to touch on this, is the value proposition of different employee groups and how healthcare is viewed by different groups. And I don't know that we spend enough time within HR really peeling back the onion of how different demographic groups or income groups in our workforces view healthcare and how they're interacting with it. And I think there's a good opportunity area there.
So much to think about there. What would you do if we could roll the clock back and you're now back in the CHRO spot and you're 3 years before retirement? What are you going to do differently, knowing everything you know now, so that you could have a material impact on your health plan over that 36 months?
Yeah, so I would, the first thing is to be very clear with my organization on what the role of healthcare is. Let's pick a lane.
Okay.
Are we going to be median, just competitive, which means employees are going to continue to pay, a good chunk of the escalating costs? Are we going to be kind of focused there, or are we going to view it as much more of a holistic well-being approach, which is going to be a more significant investment, funding some of that investment from driving out inefficiencies? So that would be the first thing I would do, is get my C-suite and my CEO on board with where we should go. And the recommendation of where you land on that spectrum depends on your business and your particular talent strategy. So I think that's an important part. So if you decide, and in this environment, we need to lean in on the well-being side, but the money is not free. CFO is going to say, yeah, go for it. You have all the money you want. In order to do that, we need to work harder as an HR function to drive out some of the inefficiency and waste to fund the additional investment. So that's what I would have done differently, is try to set the organization up to have a kind of a collective agreement that this is the direction we want to go, understanding that we have to do our part and get tougher on finding the ways to pay for it.
Awesome. Then what's your next step? You've got a staff who maybe doesn't have any idea of what to do. What do you do differently with your staff and your leadership there?
So the first choice is to basically, I've always believed that when you're driving transformational change, you need to give people the choice. You need to give them honesty and clarity about where you're going. To the extent how it might impact them, you need to tell them, and you need to give them the respect of giving them the choice to say, hey, I buy into this, I'm on board, what do I do? or you know what, this is not really what I signed up for. You need to be able to have honest conversations with them about that and help them on their journey to go somewhere else if that's what's going to be important. So the next step would be to kind of from a change management perspective, make sure your current team is kind of, clear on where you're going, and then supplementing if some folks are staying and some folks are going, what is the skills that you need? We already talked about some of those skills. We need systems engineering types, we need financially motivated types. I
Mhm.
think you need marketing types. Look, I love
Oh,
benefits folks. I've managed them for a long time, but they're not great marketers for the most part.
yeah,
They're benefits people. So we've always talked
right.
about systems engineers and data geeks, but hey, how about some people with some communications and marketing expertise embedded in your organization to sell the plan to your workforce? Because let's be honest, we have to sell the plan to the workforce.
Totally. How would you encourage your team to realign the way you work with your major vendors?
So that change management process that I talked about with regard to
Yep.
employees, you have to have those same conversations with vendors. It's obviously not the exact same conversation, but you need to be clear with your vendors. Say, this is where we're going. We would love you to partner with us on this, but hey, left unsaid is if you don't, we'll find somebody who will, right? So that's
Yes.
why you said 3 years prior to retirement. It would take 2 to 3 years just to get this conversation going and getting
Mm,
everybody on board about the direction. Transformational change does not happen fast unless you're in a crisis, right? Unless something's like burning and you're throwing the furniture out the window. So it takes that time, and I think that that's what people don't kind of often see is you need to build that foundation. Once you get everybody on board and aligned to the vision, vendors, employees, your staff, then I always looked at it as my job was just to kind of get them there, and they will take you where you want to go and beyond.
if you could paint the future of what you'd love to see, what would you like to see with groups like the HTA and uh, OPI and HRPA and others, and the leaders who work with these organizations? What would you like to see them change?
I think it's an opportunity more than a change. And I have another passion
Mhm.
around. I led a project for the association last year called the Latino Worker Project. So I grew up as a Mexican American
Mhm.
in California in the 60s and have seen Latinas and Latinos go from a very small portion of the population to now the largest non-white in terms of growth segment of the
Oh yeah,
workforce. I
by
think
far.
we are missing the boat with regard to not just Latinos, but all of the demographic groups in our workforce about really using the data that we have at our fingertips now across all the different platforms and how we're gathering it to understand how different groups in the workforce experience healthcare. And, talk about opportunity when you have different both behaviors and health outcomes amongst different groups across your employee base. Why aren't you asking the question of why, and why aren't you diving under the covers and saying, hey, are there cultural factors? What are the factors that are driving, for example, why one group of people do not take advantage of preventive services the way another group of people do? What are the factors that
Right.
that go into that? So I would like to see more, and it's not a DE&I initiative as much as it is a workforce initiative. And so I think the future of DE&I in the workplace really needs to pay more attention to how well-being is affecting differentially people in the workplace, and what are we doing and what can we do better to reach groups in a culturally competent way. And to do that, you need to look at you know the data, but you also need to look at your own team and how you're approaching it. So I would love to see much more we're going to be America's going to be a non-white majority country in 20 years.
Hmm.
um, Huge opportunity for employers that get this right. And healthcare and health and well-being, again, I worked with Latinos. Huge opportunity with that workforce to generate commitment and loyalty to your organization in an area of healthcare, particularly around the family, which is hugely important in these populations. So it's a niche kind of answer to your question, maybe not what you were expecting, but I think there's a huge opportunity there to dive into the new workforce and the diversity in the workforce and really target strategies to make healthcare more meaningful and more accessible to them.
What a terrific way to end our conversation today. If people are interested in getting in touch with you, what are they okay to reach out through LinkedIn or another?
Yeah, absolutely, through LinkedIn or through the HR Policy Association website. Love to hear from folks, and also love to hear your thoughts and ideas about. Look, our leadership at HR Policy calls me the disruptor in chief. That's kind of my unofficial title. So I'm all about, like, how can we break things and reassemble them in a new and better way. But thank
Love
you
it.
for all the work you guys are doing at HTA. It's phenomenal. We really love partnering with you, and excited to have this chance.
Thank you. Appreciate it so much, Shelly. Well, that wraps up. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening into this episode of Broken Benefits. So many great insights here. If this was helpful to you or interesting, please share with a friend. It helps for more people to discover the podcast and be able to continue sharing the message. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on Broken Benefits. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, please share today's show with a friend or colleague. It's free to do, and it helps us spread the message to as many people as possible.